start webinar and then pass it over to me. It's about 5 o'clock and we're going to get started shortly. We see that people are still joining us right now. So this webinar has simultaneous Spanish translation. So now is a good time to choose your language. If you look down at the Zoom control panel, you will see the globe that says interpretation on it. And that's how you'll be using your English or Spanish, choosing your English or Spanish language. All right, so we'll give everyone a few minutes to choose their language and then we'll get started.
And if anybody's having trouble joining the interpretation language part, go ahead and write it in the Q&A so that we know about, whoopsie, so that we know about that. Okay.
Okay, so we're going to get recording here in a second. We are recording this in both English and Spanish. All right, so welcome to How to Read and Understand Your Homeowner's Insurance Policy. My name is Emily Rogan. I'm the Senior Program Officer for United Policyholders, and I've been with the organization for 12 years now.
What's happening here?
As I mentioned, it's okay. As I mentioned, we are recording this webinar. If you have questions or need clarification during the webinar, you can use the Q&A feature on your Zoom control panel. But for individual questions, we ask that you hold off until Wednesday for our Roadmap to Recovery Q&A. This webinar is packed with really good information, and we're going to be giving you information on how to go through your insurance policy. We want to give everyone time to do that. So I always start with about United Policyholders. If there's anyone who is joining us for the first time, United Policyholders is a nonprofit organization. We are a voice and an information for insurance consumers, which means we don't take money from insurance companies and we don't sell insurance. We are a nonprofit that is on your side. So we are funded by donations from individuals and businesses and grants from community foundations. And a lot of our work gets done with our amazing volunteer corps of both personal and professional people who have experience in disaster recovery and insurance. So we have 3 programs. We are here with the Roadmap to Recovery program. We also have a preparedness program that helps people before and an advocacy program as well. So Team United Policyholders is made up of our professional staff and as well as our volunteer corps, and all of this work gets done with coordination and collaboration with our government and nonprofit partners as well. So a big thank you to the Napa Valley Community Foundation and the Community Foundation of Santa Cruz County, who are funding this Roadmap to Recovery effort here in 2020. So the fine print. So this webinar is intended to give you general guidance. We don't give legal advice. So if you do have a specific legal question, we recommend that you consult with an experienced attorney. And if it's about an insurance claim, we recommend that that person has experience in insurance law. So today's topic is how to read and understand your policy. We will be going over how to understand what's inside, determining all your available benefits, understanding lingo and claim rules, including depreciation, code upgrades, and extended benefits. So if you were unable to join us for our insurance and recovery orientation last week, that webinar is available on our website, and we want to make sure that you're starting a claim diary. That was one of the pieces of advice we gave you last week. It will help you stay organized and keep your claim moving forward. And it's really important because it's likely that the adjuster that you're working with now may not be with you the whole way through this process. So you want to make sure that you are not relying on your memory of what they told you, but instead writing it down and creating this written paper trail. And then when you are asking for something, we want you to speak up. So with your insurance company, present your request clearly and in writing. Write down and tell them what you need, when you need it, and why you're entitled to it. Using documentation and referencing your conversations that you've written down in your claim diary. And then also through this webinar tonight, you will get an understanding of what's in your policy. So if your adjuster is telling you something that you're unsure about, or you want something else, a good phrase to remember is, can you show me where it says that in my policy? Because you will now also understand what's in your policy, and maybe better than your out-of-state adjuster. So with that, I'm going to pass it over to my colleague, Sandra Watts. So Sandy is our project coordinator and instructor, and she has over 30 years of experience with insurance claims and claim management. So Sandy, take it away.
Hi everyone, and nice to see you tonight. I'm having a little problem with my screen. As you guys can see, I kept doing that for Emily. I'm going to turn off the Q&A so that I can see all this. So thanks for joining us. This is going to be really pretty dense stuff. I know all of you probably weren't planning to learn how to read an insurance policy as part of your activities this year, and I'm sorry that that's what you're having to do now. But I'm going to go through it, and I'm going to go through it step by step. I am an ex-State Farm 23-year claim adjuster and claims manager for State Farm, and so I've had a lot of experience teaching new claim representatives how to read the policy. So we're going to go through sort of in that way, and I have all sorts of different policies here with examples tonight. Keep in mind, if you're not from California, all of the ways that I'm going to show you how to read the policy are going to apply. But everyone needs to look at their own policy language to make sure that what they have is what they're reading. So these are all just samples. So if you see something, don't assume that it's in your own policy, okay? So I'm gonna get started. Here, I have to grab it back here from, okay, I've got it back. Oops, sorry. A few little technical things. Okay, so where to start? Hopefully you guys have had the opportunity to request a copy of your policy from your agent or your adjuster. We do recommend that you ask for a certified copy of your policy, which is one where someone in underwriting checks it and an officer of the company signs it and verifies that it is actually current and correct copy. The insurers are legally obligated to provide you with a complete and accurate copy within 30 days. That's a California law. However, they are not required to provide you a certified copy. We suggest that you ask for it so that you can, if they give it to you, great. But whatever they send you, accept it. Don't fight for the certified one because you're just going to go round and round. But then check it, and we're going to show you how, okay? So on our website, we have a ton of information. Hopefully you've all been there and looked around a little bit, but we do have a sample letter requesting a copy of your policy. If your insurer refuses, the Department of Insurance may be able to help you. So make a working copy so you can highlight it and write notes and then save your, your good copy. Okay, here's a copy of our sample letter that we have on the website. It's uphelp.org/samples, and then you'll get a list of different sample letters that we have. Also there, you're going to find a simplified guide to your homeowner's insurance policy. A couple of people have asked on the chat, we will have this PowerPoint presentation available for you in a PDF and PowerPoint. We are recording it. I hope I'm recording mine because it's impossible to tell without moving the thing. So we will have that available for you. Okay, just a few things before we start. The policies that I have used as samples are homeowners policies for the most part. But the way we do this and the language is very similar. So if you have a mobile or manufactured home or a renter's insurance policy, I just wanted to hit on that. They're very similar language. You use the same methods to determine coverage. We have the same sort of buckets. You'll hear a lot about buckets. And the valuation is the same. There are some differences in the policies. You'll see them in the language of the policy, but for the most part, similar. Same with renters policies. The main difference between a homeowner's policy and a renter's policy is that the renter's policy does not cover any structure, okay? There are some that cover improvements that you make on your own to the structure, but it's usually very limited. The obligation to clean and repair the structure belongs to the owner of the property, which is why. So you need to work with your landlord to have the structure cleaned and repaired, okay? Coordinate with them. In general, the building should be cleaned first and then the contents. Or you can hire a company to do them at the same time. You can coordinate. But one of the things you'll need to do is remind your adjuster that the time it takes to repair the structure to make it rehabitable, it's out of your control. So you're going to need ALE during that time, and they're going to need to provide it for you. Okay? So when you ask for your policy and they send you information, how do you know whether you have a complete copy? I had someone send me a copy the other day, and the actual policy wasn't there. It was all endorsements. So I'm going to show you exactly what you should look for. There's a lot of information on there, but these are the things that you're going to need. First and most important is the declarations page, okay? And it shows the name of the insured, important, the location of the property, the effective date of the policy, and then all of the coverage forms and limits that are in force for that policy, okay? These two things are somewhere in the packet, and these are the two important ones. So you're going to see a ton of notices. That's what these notice or compliance pages are. But these are the ones you want to look for. You want to look for your California Residential Property Insurance Disclosure, the Residential Property Bill of Rights, then your actual policy form, and then the endorsements that are attached to that form. And they're also sometimes called riders, okay? The other pages are just informational, and it's amazing how many pages there are. But these are what you're looking for, okay? So let's start, and I'm just gonna go through this systematically. Declarations, so this is the key to all of your insurance payments, okay? It's basically where the money is, okay? They all look different, but they should all contain the things I listed: the name of the insured, the location of the insured property, the effective date. I've looked at policies, and sometimes it's a 2-year-old declaration, so you need the new one. The major coverages and limits, the forms and endorsements, and then the deductible. Sometimes there's multiple deductibles, there's a deductible for wind or something, and then there's a deductible for everything else. And then also your mortgage company information is going to be there. I'm just going to briefly touch on that. Every time your insurance company issues a payment for damage to the structure, sorry, there's a bit of light on my face, they're required to list your mortgagee. There's a clause in your mortgage and a clause in the insurance policy that says that building payments have to be made to both of you. That is to protect the mortgage company's interest, the money that they loaned you for the property. So you'll see that you need to contact your mortgage company and work with them. Every one of them, unfortunately, has a different procedure for getting the payments processed. Okay, so I'm going to show you some sample declarations. This is a State Farm declarations page for a homeowner's policy. Here's the named insured, here's the address, here's the policy period right here. Here's the location, it's the same as the address. And then here's the money, okay? Here's the deductible, and then here's your forms and endorsements, okay? Some of them have a date next to the form. I think that they're supposed to. I'm not sure why some of them aren't having it these days, but this is what's going to list out what your policy has. Know that different companies, State Farm just has one policy and they change it by endorsement. Farmers Insurance has several policies. AAA has several policies. So be really careful. I mean, we really encourage talking to your neighbors and talking to people to share information, but be careful because even if you both have the same insurance company, you might have different coverages, okay? So you just need to know that. Here's another, this is an AMCO policy, and I just wanted to show you guys just different policies so you can see what's up. Same thing, you've got the name and address, you've got your policy period, you've got your coverage limits listed across this way. Looks like my slide got moved around a little bit. This is the mortgage company, and then these here are all your policy forms and endorsements, okay? Usually the main policy is right here. It's usually HO3, HO5, something like that, and then all of these are endorsements, things that change your policy, and we'll get to that, okay? So that's your homeowner's page. Let me just point out one thing. This is a continuation declaration, which is a little bit different than your first policy declarations, and some of them will say renewal notice. If you get a renewal notice and you're missing something, call your insurance company and try to get a copy of the actual declaration. Some of them have less information. Okay, I'm going to touch on this really closely. Quickly. This is the California Residential Insurance Disclosure. This tells you what sort of extras you have on your policy. And it'll be marked whether you have actual cash value, replacement cost coverage, extended replacement cost coverage. Most of you should have this guaranteed replacement cost coverage. I haven't seen one of those in years now. There might be some out there. And then building code upgrade. Okay, so that's the reason that you need to look at that. Okay, did I miss my, somehow I lost one of my slides. The other, anyway, let's go on. This is how you know code upgrade and extended replacement coverage are the two coverages that are sort of the hardest to find and also the most important, okay? And I'll dig deep into both of them. Extended replacement cost adds to your coverage limits, extends your coverage A, and code upgrade pays for things that you didn't have, that you need to add when you rebuild your house. So when you look at these declarations, I just pulled them out, you have to look and see. So this one talks about the increased dwelling. That's the same idea. They're named different things, okay? So you have to kind of dig through, but this one specifically says increased dwelling coverage, and it gives you the actual amount for this one, and it gives you the name of their endorsement. And this one has ordinance or law, 25%, gives you the money figure and tells you the number. This one over here, some of them aren't as easy to read. This one says replacement cost. So when you see something like extended replacement cost, this one, and when you pay a little premium, that's probably the coverage. And I'll show you how to look for that later. This endorsement, I couldn't really tell because it doesn't have, this is what I think adds it on, but really this declaration here, you can't tell. So it's going to be very dependent upon the policy and the declaration that you have. And sometimes you really have to dig, okay? Oh, here's the one I was looking for. This is the California Residential Property Insurance Bill of Rights. And the reason that I included that is that there's two really important parts to this. I mean, it's all very important, but there's two things. In the event of a claim, an itemized written scope of loss report prepared by the insurer or its adjuster within a reasonable period of time. That's right there. They have to give you their own estimate. And down here, also very important, sorry, my little thing is right in the way. A consumer is also entitled to select a licensed contractor or vendor to repair, replace, or rebuild the damaged property covered by the insurance policy. The actual regulation on this, and we're not going to get too deep into the regulations because we're going to talk about the policy, but the actual regulation on this is they can't even suggest it to you unless you ask. Okay, if you specifically ask them to provide you names, then they can give it to you, but until then, they're not even supposed to utter a repair firm. Just know that. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to take your declarations page and we're going to show you how to match it with the wording in the policy to get the maximum available benefits that you're entitled to for your loss. And this is just sort of this is just another example. There's your dwelling coverage here. This is another word for the extended replacement cost. This one's called limited home replacement cost. It gives you a percentage and it gives you the number. Also, this policy has building code upgrade and it puts the limit right here. So that's just one more example of how to find it, okay? So now we're gonna dive into the policy. So for most of you, the policy is usually kind of a booklet. Sometimes they're small, sometimes they're big, but these are all the things that are covered in the policy, okay? And we're just gonna go through them. And sorry, some of you guys are going to, it's gonna get really boring, unfortunately, and some of you guys are gonna grab on. I'm trying to keep this at just the level that, for the things you guys need that will help you. So I've tried to divide it out. So I apologize in advance that we're going through definitions straight out the gate. But the definitions are really important. So if the term is defined in your policy, then you use that meaning of the word. Okay, so if it has a specific definition, then you use that meaning. If it's not otherwise defined, then the law says, and I'm not a lawyer, by the way, folks, I'm a claims adjuster, so don't, nothing I say is legal advice. But if it's not otherwise defined, then you generally use the common meaning of the word found in the dictionary, okay? And how you know that they're defined when you're reading the policy, some policies bold them and some policies use quotes to let you know to go back to the definitions and read what their definitions are. Some of the important ones are insured, building structure, actual cash value, property damage, those type of things, okay? So these are examples and these are really important because sometimes, you think, oh, well, I'm the insured. Well, in this policy, this is a State Farm policy, it means you and your relatives, if they live with you, okay? And if you have someone, like if you have a kid that lives with you who's under 21, if they live with you, they're an insured. I put these two in to show you the differences in definitions by insurance company. So two different ways to determine actual cash value. This one says fair market value, and this is more for personal property. And then this one talks about replacement cost less depreciation. You don't have to worry too much about this right now because you're going to look at your own policy. But just know that different policies can define words differently. That's what that's meant to show. Okay, so now we move on to coverages. And the coverages tell us what's covered. So, very specific. This is the broadest language. This tells us basically what types of things they insure. Okay, not what they're insured for, but what types of things. Okay, and they're usually identified by A, B, C, D. These are the ones, some of them are different. State Farm Coverage B is contents, and coverage C is loss of use, but you get the idea. It doesn't really matter what letter. Sorry, I have to keep slowing down so I don't go too fast for the interpreter. So it doesn't much matter what letter is assigned. You just need to know for your policy which one is which. Renters policies are the same, but you won't have a coverage A in your renters policy. Okay, so coverage A, almost always it's the dwelling. I've never seen one with something else. And it is important. In general, it covers your main house. Okay, and most of them add, like if you're doing some work around the house and you have some construction materials, most people include that in. Some cover attached structures and some do not. So you have to just read your policy and go from there. It's usually pretty straightforward that it's your main house. Okay. Coverage B, other structures, sometimes also called dwelling extensions. These are generally outbuildings, so detached garages. Most of the policies say separated from the dwelling by clear space. And then some of them, and I'll show you here, have other things that are also other structures. So most of these policies give you automatically 10% of your coverage A limit toward dwelling extension or other structures, okay? Some companies let you buy, get the light off me here. Some companies let you buy additional coverage if you have a lot of different structures. You need to, if you have these, you need to talk to your insurance companies. Some will let you increase it and some won't. What qualifies as an other structure or dwelling extension does vary quite a bit by company, so you have to read it. So because some things that are other structures under one policy might be landscaping or hard landscaping under another policy. So I just wanted to give you an example. Okay, dwelling extension, we cover other structures on the premises separated from the dwelling by clear space. And then structures connected to the dwelling by only a fence or utility line are also considered to be other structures. Most of them exclude business purposes, like if you have an office, so you need to watch that. And some of these, like here is an example of bold, separate structures. Okay, that means that that's defined somewhere else. And I put the definition right down here. And for this policy, it includes not only buildings, but fences, walls, sidewalks, walkways, driveways, pools, pool cages. So that's pretty common. This is a farmer's policy, but it's pretty common. Okay, so that's how you know what is coverage A and what is coverage B. So now, for any of you who have had your claim after January 1st, 2019, there is a new law in California. And it's right here. You can write down the number and read it, but I'm not going to read it to you. But basically, if you run out of policy limits on coverage A, they'll let you take the money from coverage B and use it to rebuild your house. And you aren't obligated to rebuild that. Like say you had a detached garage or something like that. Usually in order to get all the money for it, you would have to replace it. But now they're not requiring you to replace it. You can just move that money from one bucket to the other. Okay. So that's going to be helpful for some of you. And this, I'm just going to say, this has not been used or tested very much. This is a very new law in California. So, and a lot of you might have out-of-state adjusters who don't know anything about this. So it's really important to educate yourself and know how these work so that you can make sure that they're giving you what you need. Okay, coverage C is contents, okay? Contents coverage covers personal property owned by the insured where it's anywhere in the world. So if someone, like say a family member had a bunch of their contents at your property, they might have coverage for their own property under their insurance policy. They need to look into it. we always have this thing, and I like it, to know what's contents. Imagine taking the roof off of your house, turning it upside down and shaking it, and whatever falls out is personal property. So things that are not attached to the premises, okay? You might have some off-premises coverage. You might have some guest coverage. Those vary by policy. And then one of the things you're going to find is that a lot of items are subject to special coverage limits. So you're going to need to watch that. We've got some examples here for you. Okay, this is a very standard, I think this is a Liberty Mutual, very standard personal property coverage explanation here. Owned or used by an insured anywhere in the world. If your request will cover property of others. It talks about your limit of liability if you have another residence. So you've got to read all of that. Okay, so let's hit, a lot of policies have special limits, and these are things that are generally things that disappear quickly, that they want to keep some control over. Money, cash has limits, goes between about 150 and about 500. Some might have 1,000, something like that. Securities, generally 1,000. Business property, this is going to become increasingly important now that COVID has moved everybody's workplaces to their homes. We really need to talk to people about being mindful about how much business property you have in your house, but beware that they're going to probably limit that. Watercraft is generally just so they can cover, you know, your canoes and your kayaks and things like that. Trailers, $1,000 on most policies. And then there's usually an electronic equipment, some type of computer limitation on most policies. A lot of policies have limits on jewelry, firearms, and things like that. But most of those limits, rugs, things like that, most of those limits only apply to theft. And you have full coverage in general for damage caused by fire. So you want to read that. Okay. Property not covered under your contents. If you have a specific policy, like say you have, you know, a fancy piece of jewelry or a piece of art that you have specifically insured, people do that because the specific policies on those items are broader coverage. They can cover it if it's being transported, things like that. So if it's specifically insured, it's not covered under your homeowner's policy. Animals, birds, and fish are not covered. Although I did find in the farmer's policy, there is a burial provision if your pet perished in the fire. I'm very sorry. There is some coverage under a farmer's policy that I saw for pet burial. If you have any tenants, roomers, or boarders, anybody who lives with you who does not qualify as an insured under that definition that I showed you, their property is not covered. A lot of times there's a lot of misunderstanding on rental policies. If the house burns down, the tenant goes to the landlord and says, you know, pay me for my property. And it doesn't work that way, okay? Motor vehicles, even if they're non-operable. A lot of people say, oh, I had, you know, parts, or I hadn't, you know, one that I was taking apart and working on. Motor vehicles and their parts are generally excluded. They do pay for like golf carts. You have to look at your policy. Golf carts, anything you need. If you're handicapped and you need assistance with your mobility, those are covered. And then recreational vehicles aren't covered. And these are basically because, you know, you need to buy specific coverage for your cars and your recreational vehicles and your boats, okay? Okay, so we're gonna move on to coverage D, which is ALE and loss of use. I know a lot of you have a lot of questions about this coverage, and I want to go through it. You need to check your coverage and your limits because they vary by company, okay? So some of them have what's called actual loss sustained. Some of the big companies, State Farm, Allstate, Liberty Mutual, they have actual loss sustained, which means there's no cap, excuse me. Some of them have a money limit. Some of them have a time limit, and then some of them have both. Okay, so you have to check your policy, and I'll show you. Also, check your policy for coverages. There's 3 different types you can get, and I'll go through these, but additional living expenses, fair rental value, which is what you could have rented your house for, and then the prohibited use / civil authority. Now, I haven't put much in on the civil authority. That really, and your adjusters might be confused. A lot of you they've talked about cutting you off after 2 weeks. The prohibited use and civil authority really comes into play when you're evacuated, okay, and you have no damage to your property, none whatsoever, in terms of making your residence uninhabitable. Or you have very, very light damage that your house is still livable. And generally those go about two weeks. So if, your insurer is saying you only have 2 weeks of coverage, but in the meantime, your house burned down, your coverage moves basically from this civil authority prohibited use to ALE. Okay. So I hope that that's clear to everyone. Okay, I've got a few examples here. This is I think this is a AMCO policy. This is one where their loss of use is a money amount, $120,100. And then we'll talk about time limits. This one doesn't have a time limit written here. And a lot of you know that California has a law when there's a declared disaster. If you're part of that declared disaster, your insurer, it's generally 24 months and they can extend it to 36 months if you need it. So it doesn't increase your coverage limit is the point there. So sometimes you need to really think about that. That's happening there. Move. Okay, here's an example of a loss of use ALE that says actual loss sustained. This is a State Farm policy. This means there's no money limit. Okay, so what you need to do with your ALE, your loss of use, is you need to take this part from your declarations, whether you have a money limit or not, and couple it with what the coverage is. Okay. And this one says, and this is really important, and I'm going to say this is a pretty standard language. It's getting less and less standard as the companies modify their policies more and more. But this is an example of very broad coverage, and a lot of you are in this situation. So I'm just going to step it through here and show you. I'm going to show you one more, and then well, let's go back here, sorry. So you just go through, and some of you I've done this with already before, but it's when a loss insured, okay, that's gonna be ahead, but I'm assuming all of you are fire survivors. Fire is a loss insured, okay, I'm gonna tell you that. Causes your residence premises, this is bolded, so it's defined, that's your dwelling where you live, to become uninhabitable. Okay, so that's not defined. So we use the common use of the term, and that means unfit to live in. Okay, we'll cover your necessary increase to maintain your standard of living for up to 24 months. The standard policy says 24 months. State law can extend this past 36 months. Okay, here is a sample of farmers insurance. This one has a money limit and a time limit. So the money limit, that's a nice high limit. The 24 months, again, if you're in California, the state law overrides this 24 months. And if you need it, there's some specific ways to get it, but if you need it, you can go up to 36, okay? The other distinction, and the reason that I put this farmers one here, is because it's a lot different. It's different than the State Farm policy. And it says accidental, direct, distinct, and demonstrable, okay? Physical loss or damage to the dwelling, okay? Makes that part of the dwelling where you reside uninhabitable by you. Okay, so this one specifically says that the damage has to happen to your dwelling. I'm going to go back. This one just says an insured loss has to make your house uninhabitable. So the argument to this is that if you don't have water or power, even if it's off-site, there's no exclusion. It doesn't say it has to happen to your house under this first policy, but if you have this second policy, the damage has to be on your property. Okay. And so that's a really big distinction. Okay. We'll move on. This is a AAA policy, and this AAA policy is different in that it gives you two options. Okay. It gives you additional living expenses. Okay, meaning necessary and reasonable increase in living expenses incurred by you, so your household can maintain your normal standard of living, and we'll get to that. And this one says loss insured, residence, premises uninhabitable. Okay, so that's the standard you have to meet. But AAA has fair rental value, and it is worded differently than the others. State Farm and some of the others have fair rental value, but it only applies, and I'm sorry I didn't snip it here, it only applies to the part of the house that you rent out. So say you rent a room or a cottage or something to someone, it'll pay your fair rental value, like your lost rent for that. This is the fair rental value of your own home. Okay, so and you get to choose. It's your option. Okay, between right here, we cover at your option either additional living expenses. Okay, so that's the amount over and above what you normally spend, or fair rental value, which is what your house would rent for on the market. Okay, and include furniture. So in a lot of cases, I kind of like the fair rental value. Because it's a negotiated amount based on the fair rental value of the home you lost, whereas ALE, it's the increased cost, and you have to keep track of everything you spend. They subtract out, like if you normally spend, $100 a week on groceries, and now you spend $200 or whatever you're going out to eat, they only pay you over and above. So you need to check your policy and see which one applies. As far as everything, and I've been reading these policies now for a couple, for years, but really heavily for a couple weeks. And AAA is the only one I've seen that. However, from the prior fires, some of the carriers who don't have fair rental value have extended that to people. So if you think that this is something that would be beneficial to you, then we recommend that you ask. They can, the worst they can say is no. So, okay, so we're going to go through this one more time. And this is the breakdown of the language. When a loss and this is the language that's the broad language in most of the policies. When a loss insured, fire, causes the resident's premises, your house, to become uninhabitable, not fit to live in. If this is met, and there's no exclusions in the policy, then they owe you ALE, okay? Some policies I put down here say that it has to be your property that's damaged that causes it, and most don't, okay? So hopefully that is clear. One of the things, and we'll get to it with refrigerated products, but one of the things that I see some of the adjusters being confused about is the power and water issue. So if your house maybe has been cleaned of the smoke, but you have no water or power, they're calling that power interruption, okay? It's not, it's fire. The fire caused the loss, and we'll get to that a little bit later. Okay, what are you owed? So your increased cost, okay, over and above what you normally spend. And all of this is on our website to you guys. We have we have a really good publication that's called Survivors Speak. And they talk about ALE from a very, very practical survivor point of view. But as you guys know, if you own your home, you have to continue to pay your mortgage. So the rent on your temporary home, that's over and above what you normally spend. If you're a renter, okay, and you normally pay $1,500 a month, but now you can only find a place for $2,000 a month, the additional $500 is the increased cost. And again, I'm not a lawyer, but technically your landlord should rebate your rent from the day your house became uninhabitable until the day you can reoccupy it. That amount of your rent should not be payable. They can collect that from their insurer. So that's that. Here's monthly food cost. I already talked about that. Sometimes utilities, so say you had a utility bill, but now utilities are included in your rent. Some of your insurers might try to deduct that because you'll be saving money. And your insurer, people get really offended by these questions, and I kind of get it. But your insurer will say, well, what do you normally spend per week on food? What do you normally spend, you know, and all this, but you do need to answer those questions for them. Okay. Maintain your standard of living. This is really, really important. I see a lot of people living in a very cramped locations, and I get it on how hard it is to find housing. There was housing shortages, you know, huge housing shortages after the Camp Fire in Paradise in Sonoma County. And I know that that's happening again. So just know that if you have to stay somewhere that's sort of, you know, cramped, like if you're all staying in a, you know, in a one-room apartment or something, do that for a little amount of time and then try to find a place that matches how you used to live. The UP saying that this is a marathon, not a sprint, is true. And I'm going to talk a little bit about creative ways to use your ALE. But for the most part, these creative ways are when you have a limit and you're worried about running out of those limits. Okay, so if you have an actual loss sustained policy, personally, unless you want to live in an RV on your property, if you want to, it's great and that's fine, whatever you want to do. Know that maybe 2 or 3 years of doing that gets a little tedious. If you have to do it to maintain your, you know, to use your limits during this really long time, then it's a great way to do it. But if you don't have a limit, I urge you to find something comfortable that works for you. So how long? So one of the things I want to talk about with the law, 2051.5, and we'll sort of look at that, but it's not, whoopsie, it's not automatic. My mouse is gone. It's not automatic, okay? And the way the law is worded is the policy provisions apply. And the important ones are the shortest time required to repair, replace, or for your household to settle elsewhere. This doesn't mean that they can press you into, I know a lot of you are being pressured to get your repairs done by certain people so that they can get back in. You're allowed to have your home to a reasonable time to repair your house and get back in there. Mainly, this is mainly for the partial loss people. So it's, you know, and it's not necessarily the shortest time to do a bad job to get back in your house. It's to have the work done right. So, but know that it's not automatic, the ALE. Okay, so these are some of the things. Temporary housing, if you need a renter's policy for your temporary location. Mileage, if you were commuting, you know, 10 miles a day and now you're commuting 40 miles a day because your temporary house is farther away, you can collect that. Setup fees, you know, to get internet and things like that at your new house. Photocopying and mailing expenses, moving costs, pet boarding costs. The statute does require your insurance company to give you a list. It's very funny. Somebody asked for that not too long ago and their insurance company sent them our list. So if you find our list on the site, it's a good list. I was laughing at that. So, okay, gonna move on here. So creativity and ALE, they have quite a bit of leeway, okay? This comes into play when you're concerned that your dollar limit won't last the entire length of time you need it, okay? It's gonna be a kind of a long process, especially if you have a total loss. So if you're worried about that, you don't have to worry too much about your time limits now. I mean, as long as you're moving forward reasonably, so you don't need to worry about that. But if you have a low limit for your ALE, once you run out, that's the end. So negotiate it up front. Some of the people, if your limit's low, the insurers have paid people out and said, you know, either like a year at a time, or some of them, if they knew you were going to run out, they just gave people the whole policy. You can ask for fair rental value instead of incurred if you think that's going to work easier for you. Negotiate a lump sum. Just be careful. You know, negotiating a lump sum is a little bit dangerous because you could negotiate in good faith and say, hey, you know, he's going to give me a year and a half under my policy. That sounds great. And then a year and a half comes and you've encountered some sort of delay, and now you've sort of run out. So just be careful of that. A lot of people in the Paradise after the campfire bought fifth wheels or recreational vehicles so that they could stay on their property. This is a good way. You need to work with your county or your town to make sure that that is something that's allowed. There's been a lot of back and forth up in Paradise on whether or not they're allowed to stay there. So we have an ALE question. Yeah, go ahead, Mark, and butt in and tell me your ALE question. Mark says there's an ALE question that he thinks is important. So we're going to let Mark say something here.
Hate to really hear Sandy, but I have two quick situations that I just wanted to bring up. We have one question about what if all they can find is something that is better, better than the lost home, the bigger and nicer home. And then second, what about ALE for repaying friends and family who offered free housing and food?
Great. And for those of you who can't see him, that is Mark Dillman. He is our staff attorney. So he is the one that's answering your questions there. You know, it's not going to hurt to ask. So one of the things that we always say is ask. If you don't ask, you'll never get it. Some of the policies say specifically that they're not going to pay to increase your standard of living. I think it's the farmer's policy that says that. You might negotiate and maybe pay a little part of it yourself if you're able. Just talk to them, try to work it out with them. The same goes with family and friends. I think that it's unreasonable for the insurance company, this is just my opinion, for them to benefit from the goodwill of your family and friends, which I'm going to tell you at a certain point will kind of, run out. I'm sure you have very patient family, but no problem. You know, some people negotiate leases and say, look, you know, my family has this space, but it is, you know, we're a burden to them and we want to pay them rent. So be upfront, don't try any trickery, you know, be upfront, negotiate a lease with your brother and sister-in-law, and, you know, let your insurance company pay them. You can, you know, do things like that, but yeah, so be creative. I'm just going to say, get it in writing, because what's going to happen, and you guys have already seen it, is adjusters are going to come and go. I've talked to people who've had 3-4 adjusters already. There's some difficulties with communications happening. And so what you don't want to do is have a great deal set up with your adjuster who then disappears with all the documentation. So if you do something, any of these creative things are great. They're completely allowed and on the up and up. They're voluntary to the insurance companies. So know that the insurance companies are obligated to, you know, they have their contract, so they can make you turn in receipts and incur the losses and all of that. So anything that they do, if they say, oh, well, we don't have a fair rental value in our policy, but we're going to give it to you, it's voluntary. So I would make sure, same with the fifth wheel, there's a lot of them agreeing to that. Just make sure you have it in writing. Okay. And the same thing with your better property. I have seen people, you know, if it's the only place, it's the only place. So keep going on that. Okay. So we're going to move on. Sorry, it's almost been an hour and we're going to try to get through this. These are additional coverages. These are super important. Debris removals, trees, plants, and shrubs, temporary repairs, and refrigerated products, which I'm so sorry I had to add to this PowerPoint. Debris removal, okay? It usually adds an additional 5% to each coverage once the underlying limit, if you run out, okay? Some policies don't have this extra 5%, and some policies might have a little higher percentage. But the way this works, and it's super complicated, I don't know why they do it, but if you're like, say you're estimating the cost, if you've lost your house and they're estimating the cost to rebuild your house, debris removal is the first thing that has to happen. So most insurance companies put it on the estimate, in the regular estimate, get the rest of the estimate for the house, and then once the limit is reached, that opens up 5%, and they move 5% of the debris removal out of coverage A and into this extra debris bucket. Okay, I am not aware of what's happening right now. I'm sure some of my coworkers are, but I've been out of this loop. But a lot of the prior disasters have had what they call a consolidated debris removal program with FEMA and Cal OES, where they come in and the county takes some of the cost off of the homeowner. I haven't seen that implemented yet. It doesn't mean that it hasn't happened. But if it does, you can use whoever you want. You can use a private contractor. You can use the consolidated program if they have it. Just know when you sign up for the FEMA program, what you're signing up for. You know, there's a contract that you'll have to sign that gives them the right to enter your property, to sign over your 5% coverage limit to the county and different things like that. If you hire a private firm, make sure that they comply with your county requirements for the disposal and removal of toxic substances. I know that in Santa Cruz, they've told everybody not to do anything yet. They're doing some testing and stuff like that. Work with your county in terms of debris removal, okay? Just back to the policy, most of the policies have the 5% for each bucket. We call them buckets, coverage A, coverage B, coverage C. So a lot of them have the additional 5% debris for each bucket. So you add 5% to your dwelling, 5% to your other structures, 5% to your contents. Okay, this is the kicker, especially for you guys that live in these rural areas. Most of the policies do not include debris removal for trees, shrubs, and plants. There's usually a little extra coverage in there that says that they will pay for debris removal, but if you read it, that's when it hits the house, okay? And I'll go into that a little bit more down the road. Photograph any debris before it gets taken away. If you're gonna sift, be safe, you know, it's dangerous. Try to target, if you can see things that are recognizable in your photos, try to take pictures of that and save your photos for later, okay? I'm going to show you some language for debris removal. This one's State Farm. This one, I believe, is Farmers. Basically, it just talks about reasonable expenses. Here's where it talks about when it exceeds the limit for the damaged property. So that tells us that it applies to all the property. Some of them just say, this one says applies to A, B, or C. Some of them say coverage A only. So you have to read it, okay? Here's where this additional amount of insurance does not apply to additional coverage, item 3, trees, shrubs, or other plants, okay? So one of the unfortunate things is that these homeowners policies were never intended to cover big lots of land that had a lot of trees. We saw in Sonoma County and in Paradise, bridges and, miles of fence line and thousands of trees. These policies never really intended to cover that. These intended to cover landscaping that you had around your house. So once you hit, I'm sorry, I'm talking about landscaping, but debris removal too on the trees. So we got a little sideways there. These two coverages are very intertwined, which is why I did that. And so your trees, shrubs, and plants coverage is also usually about 5%, and it covers the destroyed landscaping, okay, and your trees. Your 5%, you're probably going to hit it early. They're probably going to cash you out, but it only covers those specific things. And it includes the loss of the plants, the replacement of plants, and the debris removal of plants. And like I said, cross-reference with your debris coverage. I have seen, and I couldn't find it, so it's not very common. I have seen one policy that does give you some tree coverage in your debris removal. So, okay. So this is the trees, shrubs, and plants coverage. These are two examples. This is a Liberty Mutual policy and a farmer's policy. It tells you what they're covered. Usually it's a named peril. We'll get to that in a little bit, but here's fire. Okay. It talks about 5% of the limit of liability that applies to the dwelling for all your trees, shrubs, plants, and lawns. There's a limit per item. This one's 500. I think this one over here is 750. So you need to look at that. This coverage is additional insurance, so it stacks on top. And then it goes on here. Here's trees, shrubs, and plants. And it's saying here, debris removal for trees, shrubs, plants, and lawns is not covered under your debris removal coverage in this policy either. So that's a very common question, and unfortunately means that you'll probably, we're not gonna, I see you guys raising your hand. We're not gonna be able to take questions in the middle of this. I'm sorry, because we still have quite a ways to go, but we'll write it down and we'll get to you later on that. But what that means, unfortunately, just to stop on that, unfortunately, it means that you're probably going to have some burned trees that you're going to have to take out yourself. Paradise did do a tree removal program, also consolidated with FEMA and Cal OES. It didn't get all of the trees, but they did deal with ones that were a threat to, like, roadways, power lines, or things like that. So hopefully something like that might come down the road. Okay, I'm going to hit this quickly, and the reason that I put this in here, I wouldn't have ever talked about it, but it sounds like people are having trouble with it. If your adjuster is telling you you only get $500 coverage for your food in your refrigerator, it is my personal opinion that they're wrong. Okay. What they're doing is these are little additional coverages that are in your policy that pay for, freezer food and food spoilage and all of this, but read them. We'll pay for the cost of loss or damage to contents in a refrigerator or freezer on the premises, spoils due to interruption of electrical utility service. Okay, it must originate off. All of these are same, power failure, mechanical failure. Okay. California is what is called a proximate cause state. And basically what they say is you look at the loss that caused the thing to be in motion, the whole series of events to be in motion. If it's the most important one, if it's covered, it's covered. Your loss was caused by fire. It was not caused by power interruption. So unless they have something that says if fire causes the power interruption, we're not going to cover it. These things are covered, and your adjuster is interpreting the policy incorrectly, in my opinion. Okay, so now we're going to get to, we did the types, sorry, the sun's coming in through here. We went through the types of property that are covered, and now we're going to talk about what they're covered for. I'm going to hit this pretty fast because it's fairly simple. In you guys' case, there's two ways that they do it. One's called all risk or broad form coverage, and that's in all accidental direct physical losses are covered unless they're specifically excluded later in the policy. Okay, that's a good kind to have. There's also named peril coverage, and that lists specific events that are covered. So first on the named peril coverage, in order to have coverage for that property, first you have to have one of the 16 named perils. Then you look to see if the exclusions apply. And if you have a named peril and no exclusion, then it's covered. Most of you, I'm just assuming you're all fire. Fire is covered. It's a named peril. It's covered under all of it. And generally, especially in California, all ensuing losses is what they're called, that arise from fire are also covered. There's a few little esoteric things, but we're not going to worry about them now. But know that your coverage A, B, and C could use different methods for your losses. So you need to look at your policy. Let me show you. Here's some examples of all risk broad form coverage. This is as broad as it gets. We insure for accidental direct physical loss to the property described in coverage A, except if it's not insured. So that's very clear. You have to have an accident, which is an event. You guys have that. Direct physical loss to your property. Smoke is a direct physical loss to your property. I'm just going to say that. Any amount of smoke, if it's in your house, it is a direct physical loss. These are some, these are some different wording. While still being all risk, they're a little bit more, there's a few exclusions on these, but this is also an all risk. This is a farmer's policy. And the reason I put this one here, this one talks about, and this applies to A, B, and C. So it'll tell you, this is only coverage A. This is one's coverage A and B. This one's A, B, and C. But this one talks about functional impairments. So where it, like say it just has like a cosmetic damage, they might not pay for it. So this one's obviously a lot more confusing. Sorry about the light here, guys. A lot more confusing than some of the other coverages. I don't know what to do here. Sorry. Okay, so these are the named perils. There's generally 16 named perils. I just listed them out here. This is an example. This is one for coverage C, talking about right here, fire or lightning is number 1. Smoke is usually number 7. Okay, so those are insured losses. This is a contents. This is pretty common. Some contents you'll see are also accidental direct physical loss, the broad coverage. More and more, they're these named peril coverages, okay? So fire, lightning, and smoke are all covered. Okay, so I'm not gonna really get into exclusions. They're super complicated. They keep the lawyers employed 24 hours a day. In most cases, the only one that I think might ever come into play with you guys is the pollution exclusion, because they call it like this absolute pollution exclusion, but I'm not even sure of that at this point in time. So don't worry about exclusions, except to say that know that we're a predominant cause state. Fire is the predominant cause of your loss. And if your adjuster is telling you things are not covered under your policy, get it in writing and have them quote the exclusion to you, okay? Also, and I'm gonna show you this, a lot of policies have exclusions and that, like code upgrades and things like that. And your policy will say code upgrades are excluded except as provided elsewhere. So what they like to do is they wanna kind of control that coverage. So they exclude it and then they add it back in with a lot of different things attached to it that make it harder. So that's all you need to know about exclusions, but if somebody does say you have one, get it in writing. Okay, this is just an example, and I wanted to show you like where they're excluding ordinance or law. And so it might seem like you don't have the coverage. This is one where it doesn't say go look in another part of your policy. So you need to, I'll show you about endorsements, and you just have to look for it yourself. Earth movement. This is a really interesting one after the Montecito fires, which were like January of 2018. They had a fire, and immediately after the fire, like a week or 2 weeks, I'm probably getting the time wrong, big rainstorm came, washed everything down the hill. Everybody's saying earth movement's not covered. Well, there was a determination made that the proximate cause of the damage was not earth movement, it was fire. That fire set the chain of events in motion and was the most important cause of the loss. And so those losses for earth movement were covered. So just kind of know that. There we go. Okay, loss settlement provisions, and we're getting near the end here, guys. Thanks for holding on. These tell you how your loss is going to be settled. You guys are going to learn all about replacement costs and actual cash value as we move through. I'm only going to hit it lightly here. And one of the things is we're going to have a whole series of these webinars, and we're going to take little things like replacement costs, actual cash value, ALE, and we're going to really expand them for you as they become important through the life of your claim. Some of these things, you know, what we're trying to get you now is a way to read these policies, to get you comfortable looking through the policies, finding the provisions, advocating for yourselves. But don't panic because this is so much information. Don't panic because these things we're going to keep at them, and we're going to get into them as we go by. And that means replacement cost, actual cash value. Okay. Those are big things that you'll learn a lot about. Loss settlement provisions these days are almost always modified in the endorsements. So if you read something in the policy, make sure you go to the endorsements, and I'll show you this for more information. Okay. The one thing, the reason that this is in here is that I know some of you are questioning like your smoke losses. Can I do the work, not myself, but can I hire people to do the work that I need done to my house because I can't wait for my insurance company? They're trying to cut me off of additional living expenses. And most policies contain language that says that they will pay for reasonable amounts that you actually and necessarily spend for coverage, for covered repairs, okay, up to the policy limits, which means if you do it and you're reasonable about it and spend the money, they're going to be hard pressed not to pay you, not to pay you back, okay? Here's just an example of an actual cash. So actual cash value is, there's two ways of determining actual cash value. For the buildings, California law is now that actual cash value is replacement cost, okay, the amount it would cost to replace your building, less reasonable depreciation on items that wear out, okay? Only things like carpet, paint, roof, and stuff like that. Sorry, I'm trying to get out of the light. For personal property, it's the same thing. Age and condition are considered in actual cash value. We're going to have a full contents webinar coming up that you guys can join that talk about personal property, and your depreciation is very negotiable. We have a publication on our website. If you put depreciation basics into the little search bar, you'll find a great publication that walks you through depreciation and actual cash value, because we can't go through it too much here. But if you see an actual cash value, if you see a loss settlement provision that says actual cash value at the time of loss, again, don't give up. Go look for an endorsement that adds the replacement cost back in, okay? So the most common thing is that you get paid actual cash value up front, and then when you replace, when you do your repairs or replacement, then you will get the difference. You'll get that amount that they hold back, okay? And so the two things I wanted to highlight here, this language right here means they will pay you the reasonable and necessary amount actually spent to repair or replace the specifically damaged component parts of the dwelling or separate structures. That is where, if you need to, you can hire your own work done and they have to pay you back, okay? And then here, right here, this is the loss settlement provision that talks about if your loss is more than $2,500, they're going to pay actual cash value until the until it's rebuilt or replaced. Okay, that is that. Okay, Policy endorsements, this is the last bit of the policy stuff. Know that when listed, they become part of your policy. They're super, super important. They're to read and to have. They modify or clarify provisions in the policy itself. They can add or remove coverages. They can limit or expand coverages, okay? Sometimes they're conflicting. Sometimes you might find yourself in a circle with one, and if you do, if you really dig that deep, you probably are actually. There's some that are conflicting. So if you find one, ask for clarification if it doesn't make sense. And I just want to show you how, this is that ACV policy that I showed you a couple of slides back. This one, not this one, this one. It's actual cash value. When I went, this is the declarations page, and I looked for this replacement cost endorsement, and look what it is. It's personal property replacement cost endorsement. And actually, I did it wrong. I grabbed the wrong one. See, this is a prime example. This should be 12567A, and I grabbed 122559. So I grabbed them from two different policies. So let that be a lesson to you. I'll tell you that they're almost the same because they're the same company, but that's how you match it up. Okay. So here, do not do what I did and make these. Oh, no, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. This is the structure. This is, I did get the right one. 12559 is right there. Sorry. I did get the right one. So you've got to look. Okay. So extended replacement coverage. This is, we're back to your dwelling, to your coverage A. And in some cases your dwelling extensions, but most homeowners policies today have some sort of extended replacement cost provision. I can't get out of the light here. And they provide additional funds to replace your home when your coverage A limits, if they're exhausted, okay, if they're inadequate, to repair or replace your building. This language, it can be anywhere. Unfortunately, in the policies, I've seen it a lot of different places, so you're going to have to look around. Most of it's in the loss settlement provision or in an endorsement, okay? And they name it different things, so look for extended, replacement, okay? And it can go from 10% to 200%, and it stacks on top of your coverage A. Here's some examples, and I'm going to go fast because we're getting long here. This is a State Farm increased dwelling. This is a AAA home endorsement. One of the things I want to bring to your attention is that some of these have a notification. If you add it onto your house or something like that, be careful because AAA is pretty tight about that. You're supposed to notify them if you remodel your house. This is just showing, again, the option ID with the amount right here that matches up with the coverage. Look for it in your policy. Okay, code upgrade coverage. Also, most homeowners policies, not all, but most, have some code upgrade coverage. Some add it as an extra amount of insurance. Some have it inside coverage A. You can purchase more most of the time if you have an older home that hasn't been updated. And this coverage pays for upgrades of your home that you're required to add on to bring the home you lost up to current codes. We're not going to get into it too deep. This is one of the hardest things for the insurers to understand. Most of them are getting it now if you want to buy a replacement home, but we'll get into this really deep in a lot of our webinars. So just know about the coverage right now. This is sample policy. Look for these words. This is an additional amount of insurance, okay, and applies only to the dwelling. Okay, things to know. This is a sample endorsement that it deletes the policy language and puts some back in. This is not an additional amount of insurance, okay? So you need to look at your policy and see if you've got extra money or not, okay? This is just another one. Oh, one of the things I wanted to show you is look for these. These are Safeco policies, by the way, and this special limit of liability. Look at this little nugget here. In the event of a covered loss resulting from an insurance services office declared a catastrophe for state in which the residence premise is located, the limit available for building ordinance or law coverage shall be increased by 100%. So if you have a disaster. ISO, the Insurance Services Offices, doesn't exist anymore, so I'm not sure what they're going to do about that. Generally, when the policy is ambiguous, it goes in your favor. This one has, in the emergency, it gives you twice the amount of extended coverage. So this is why these endorsements are so important to read. This is an amazing doubling of coverage here after your 100%, okay? Or after your, your 50% additional. Okay, this is another, this is just an example of changing the loss of use at the ALE to bring it in compliance with state law, 36 months. There is some problems with these, but I'm not going to get into it. I'm only going to hit on this really quickly. If you guys go to my webinars, I go into Insurance Code 2051.5 in detail. It's going to be the most important thing that happens to your claim in terms of helping you with your loss. Make sure if you Google it, you get September 21st, 2018 version. There's different versions, but it sets out that the cost they owe you, the amount they owe you, is the cost to repair or replace the things you lost up to your policy limits. Okay, so that is important because you want to reach that agreement in case you want to relocate. Okay, it expands the time to collect your replacement cost benefits to 36 months. It allows up to 36 months for ALE, and it lets you take all of your insurance coverages and either rebuild elsewhere or buy a replacement home. And we'll be getting into all of this really in more detail in further webinars. Just know that now. Okay, we're going to teach you how to do the math, and then we're going to wrap up here. When we talk about dwelling coverage, it turns out there's a lot of things that go into it. So you've got your main coverage A. Do you have extended replacement? Do you have debris removal, code upgrade coverage, trees, shrubs, and plants, and then inflation coverage? I'm not going to go too deep into inflation coverage, except know that it exists. It's not on every policy. I looked in some of the Safeco policies. I don't think had it. It tells you how to calculate it. So this one's a pro rata. It's a daily basis. This one only calculates once a year. But I brought it in because sometimes if you are underinsured, you know, another 2 or 3% makes a really big difference. Okay, so know that that's there. Look for it, and then do the math. Okay. For instance, and I'm just did a couple of these. If your coverage A is 500,000, and this is just an inflation, this is pro rata. If it's 3% a year, you get 15,000 increased coverage every year. Divide it by the number of days. If you had your loss after 180 days, that increases your coverage by the 7,300. And then you get to multiply it by your replacement cost coverage, which adds on. Then you get to add your debris removal coverage. So really, what I should have done is taken this 634 and added this 25,000 debris coverage. But you can see how these little coverages add up to really help you in these total losses, okay? And do something like this. Get a little chart, and we have different ones, but this is just an example where you put your limits and put all your calculations here, okay? And then you can see, like, look at this. This is everything with all the contents and everything, so it adds up to a lot. Okay, so now I'm going to turn this back over to Emily. Thank you for you guys not falling asleep. Well, you could have, and I can't see you, so. But I'm going to turn it back over to Emily, and she's going to announce later. If you have questions, write them down. We can go into depth in them next Wednesday. Go ahead, Emily.
All right. Yeah, Sandy, feel free to move the slides along for me if you'd like this time. I'm going to go through them pretty quickly. So the first one we are going to wrap up with is this voluntary claim handling reform slide. So when you have done the math, the part of the importance of having your policy and knowing what's in it is because the insurance commissioner put forth a bulletin that said these voluntary claim handling reforms are in effect. And so you as fire survivors, if you've had a total loss, you can ask for an advance of 25% coverage of your contents coverage, so of your personal property, and 4 months advance of your additional living expense coverage. So that's a really important piece because if you need money now to get settled and to really keep moving with your claim, you can ask for that. And a lot of claims adjusters do come in from out of state, so they may not be familiar with California bulletins and regulations. So keep going. And so you will get your insurance claim benefits in 3 flows. So you have these advances, you will get the actual cash value payments that your adjuster is calculating. And then once you have taken that money and either proved that the actual cash value should be more, which we will go into in our future roadmap workshops, or replace your items, whether it's your home or the stuff inside, you will get extra payments when that money has been spent. So there are 3 different ways, and if we can keep going, it's really important to make sure that as this money is flowing in, that you are aware of that, which bucket it is for. Sandy, can you advance the slide? And consider opening a separate bank account so that you can keep track of that. So all of your insurance money will go into a separate bank account so it doesn't get mixed in with what you currently have. And then, you know, the importance of staying organized. We have a couple examples that previous survivors have donated to our organization. We have an example that one survivor used on how they kept track of the money coming in, which is an insurance accounting spreadsheet. And another one is an additional living expense drawdown spreadsheet. So there are 2 different examples, and they're on our website at uphelp.org/samples. So again, just a final reminder that,
Can I
yeah, absolutely.
Sorry about that. Don't be afraid to accept the checks, the advances. They don't obligate you to say that you're accepting their decision. So I just wanted to say that people are really hesitant sometimes to cash the checks, and you can. Sorry, Emily, go ahead.
Yeah, and if you're really nervous, you know, you just follow up in writing and say, thank you for this check. It is the first check in this amount. We look forward to cooperating through the claims process to get all of the benefits we're entitled to. So really just follow it up in writing, make sure there is that paper trail, and that leads perfectly into the next slide, which is remember that this is a business negotiation, unfortunately. It is your home. We are so sorry that you have to go through this, but to remember to, you know, put everything in writing, to keep it professional. When you're asking for things, keep it short and simple with bullet points of your requests. And then also to put in when you want a reply by. And in California, we have rules that say that insurers have to respond to you in writing within a certain amount of time. So in California, it's 15 days that if you send them a letter, email counts, that they have to reply to you within 15 days. And here are a couple other ones. I'm going to go a little fast though, because we are continuing on. So while you are, you know, trying to deal with this as a business negotiation with a for-profit company, keep that in mind, it's equally as important to remember to stay connected to other disaster survivors, to make sure that they can be an important source of emotional support, but again, to be a support system to go through the claims process. So we encourage you to do that. And then if we keep going, I wanted to mention that while we are offering, you know, we've offered 2 webinars, we are here for the long haul. So we will be doing these webinars throughout the claims process. So likely throughout the next 2 years, hitting on different aspects. So we want to make sure that you know that we're here to help you put one foot in front of the other on your own path to recovery. So there's no one path for everybody, but we do have guidance over our many years to help make it digestible. And this was a very meaty presentation, and the point being that this is the foundation. This one you may refer back to many times throughout your process, and we will offer webinars to address issues some of which are listed on the screen now, but will be there. And then if you do have friends or neighbors who do not have access to the internet, or they're elderly, we do encourage you to help them request a copy of our little yellow book. So it is the Disaster Recovery Handbook. You can move the slide. And you can request one by emailing, I was a little ahead of myself, emailing yellowbook@uphelp.org. And it's a great way for people who need help to, if they don't have access to the website, then we are able to, it's a physical book. So some people learn more. But if you do have a problem along the way, whether we'll be able to help you with the self-help tips, but the Department of Insurance is a resource that we want all of you to know about. It is the state's regulatory agency on insurance. And so we will almost always include this slide because they will be able to help you if you file an official complaint. Keep going. And then again, our website is a library of resources. We have claim help. I want everyone to take a really good look. uphelp.org/2020 wildfires. We are posting all of our upcoming events there, and all of the links that we referenced throughout this presentation, they are on that page. Again, links to professional help, sample letters, tips from previous disaster survivors, and upcoming workshops. So stay informed. If you found out about this workshop from a friend, we urge you to sign up at uphelp.org/signup. And that is how we will be telling you, we'll be sending emails about future events.
And Emily, if I could just pop on here for 1 second.
Yeah, absolutely.
Confirm this for me. I just want to remind everyone that we'll be giving out the books Saturday and Sunday at the Boulder Creek Resource event. If you could just confirm that.
Yeah, absolutely. We will be. So for those of you that are in the Santa Cruz area or Boulder Creek, we will be at the resource fair, and we can include that in our follow-up email as well. I knew there was a little slide here. All right, so that is the yellow book. And a big thank you to the Napa Valley Community Foundation and the Community Foundation of Santa Cruz County for supporting this Roadmap to Recovery program. That is how we are able to offer this guidance to you. And here's just a quick look ahead of what we will be offering. So Wednesday, we will have the Roadmap to Recovery Q&A with Sandy. And then Thursday, October 1st, we're going to be offering one specifically for renters. And then Wednesday the 7th, navigating your partial loss, smoke loss claim. And then on Thursday, October 8th, navigating the dwelling portion of your claim intended for total loss survivors. So that's a look ahead. And I just want to say thank you to everybody for joining us. And, we have a lot of people, a lot of our previous disaster survivors, they often say that, they had a loss and learned way too much about insurance along the way. And that's why they give back, because by the end of this, many of you will also feel like insurance experts. Thank you for your time. And again, we will be providing a recording of this to you.
Mute myself. Okay, we do have a couple of questions here, and I'm sorry that we're not going to be able to get, we're a little bit over. I'm going to hit two of them. One person's asking about advocacy groups that help people with disabilities. There are disaster case managers and people that you should be able to link to in your community. We, as United Policyholders, we really deal with just the insurance end of it, but we urge you to go to the local assistance center and ask about disaster case managers. And then there's a quick question about ALE with family and friends. Craigslist, you can use whoever you want, Kathleen, to find a place to live. You don't have to use Craigslist. And we got some thank yous. And anybody else, we're not going to be able to go into the other questions, but Wednesday night, next Wednesday, we'll have a Q&A. I urge you guys to send your questions in advance to info@uphelp.org. That allows me, so what I usually do is I take the questions, usually there's a theme, a lot of things happening to a group of people, and I incorporate what I need into the slides. So it's good if I know in advance what you guys are asking about, and then I can expand on it. And then you guys will be able to ask your questions, and actually we'll let you ask them live and so forth. We're sorry that because it's already been an hour and a half, but we really thank you for joining us. And Emily, do you have anything else?
No, thank you, Sandy, and thank you, Karina, for translating into Spanish for us. And we look forward to helping you all through the claims process. Thank you.
Okay, take care, you guys, and have a nice night. Bye-bye.